My name is Martha Caldwell. I was born in Hartsville, South Carolina. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Welcome to Point of Rock Studio and 90 over 90. I'm Rob Sumner. It's my distinct pleasure to interview and introduce Mrs. Martha Gunter Caldwell. Mrs. Caldwell was born on April 25th, 1917 in Hartsville, South Carolina, and very quickly moved to Gastonia in Gaston County, where she lived most of her life. She's married to the late Dr. Jesse B. Caldwell Jr., and together they raised 4 children, Jesse III, Charlie, Lawson, and Martha. She's the proud grandmother of 6. Welcome to Point of Rock Studio and 90 over 90, Mrs. Caldwell. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I'm really excited about interviewing. As you know, we've known each other a long time, and you have lived a full 97 years. And I want us to spend a few minutes talking about that and learning about how we got from 1917 to 2015. Now, you were born in Hartsville. Tell me about that.
Yes, I was born in Hartsville, as you said, April 25th, 1917. I had one brother who was 2 years younger. I was a small baby. They said they didn't weigh me until they put clothes on me, and I weighed 5 pounds. But I've always been small.
You're not much over that now.
What?
You're not much over 5 pounds now.
Anyway, when I was 2 years old, my family moved to Gastonia. But I continued to be small, and my family worried because I didn't eat much and I didn't grow like other children. In those days, we didn't know about pediatricians. But my grandparents heard about Dr. McLeod in Florence, South Carolina, which really had a big hospital, had almost a big clinic there, and he had hired a pediatrician. So they took me to this man. His name was Dr. Salters, I remember, and he checked me over and he said, "There's nothing wrong with her. She's small, and she's always going to be small." So I guess those were famous last words.
Well, what was your height that you were tallest?
I was 5 feet at one time. I have shrunk.
Right. Well,
Right.
we all have.
But then we moved to Gastonia. My family rented a house on Oakland Street.
Now, how old were you when that happened?
I was 2 years old when we moved here.
Okay. And so it was
Then-
your mom and your dad and your brother
Right.
and you.
And me.
And
the
you
4 of
moved,
us.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you moved to where?
A house on Oakland Street. And then they bought a house on 5th Street in Gastonia, 415 West 5th Street, 1 block west of Chester Street. That and my earliest memories are of growing up in that house on 5th Street.
So that would be in what's now known as the York-Chester area.
Yes,
And did you attend grade school in Gastonia?
I did. I went to 1st grade at Willow School, which was on 2nd Avenue, about the location of now present Memorial Hall. It was a long wooden building, and I remember my teacher's name was Miss Weidman, and I often wondered about the name, but there were a number of big weeping willow trees at the end of the block at an area, and I often wondered if that's why they named that school, Willow School. I was there only 1 year. And
What grade?
then
Was it
went to
considered-
Central School.
Was it considered first grade?
Our 1st grade at Willow School. 2nd grade, I went to Central School. And I think shortly after that Willow School was demolished. I'm not sure. But I was in Central School from the 2nd grade through the 7th. And that's where the present charter school is on
Right.
2nd Avenue today.
Well, what kind of? Tell me. I'm not going to let you gloss over this. What kind of student were you? In terms
Well,
of, were you academically inclined, or were you
well, I
sports?
just remember studying. I don't remember my grades or anything much. I guess I did all right. But when I was toward the end of the third grade, my parents noticed that my right shoulder was lower than my left shoulder. And so they called our family physician, and as they did in those days, he came to our house. And he used what we would call a magic marker today, I guess, and drew a line on my spine. And he found that the line was crooked. So he suggested they take me to an orthopedic specialist. The orthopedic hospital was in Gastonia, the state orthopedic hospital. But that was for charity patients and no private patients. But Dr. Miller, Dr. Oscar Miller, the chief surgeon, had an office in Charlotte. So my mother took me there, and he advised that I come every day. And for several days, my mother took me to Charlotte for treatment, physical therapy. Sometimes we would drive the one car we had in our family, and sometimes she and I would ride the bus and walk about 3 or 4 blocks to Dr. Miller's office, where I would receive treatment.
Do you remember that?
I remember it vividly, and I was also fitted for a back brace, which I wore for 3 years. And at the end of the summer, Dr. Miller said, "This is very slow, and I think that she should stay out of school this year and continue frequent treatment." At that time, we were going about 3 days a week. So that year, I did not go with my classmates to the 4th grade. I had no schooling that year except reading and spelling, a little addition and so forth from my parents. There were no homeschool teachers then. So, but then the next year I did go back to the 4th grade. So, but I had a whole new class of classmates.
So you were effectively a year behind. Now, tell me about your mom and dad. What your dad did for a living, if your mom was what she did, and your relationship with them.
Yes, my father was a cotton broker in Hartsville, South Carolina, with a cotton company there. And he was sent to Gastonia to open an office because of all the mills here. It was easier to deal with the mills. And then when, after the Depression, when the mills merged and Textiles Incorporated was founded, he was the cotton buyer with that firm.
Okay. And how about your mom?
And my mother was always a homemaker.
Okay.
She never worked outside the home. She enjoyed being at home, and she especially loved working in her flower garden. And we had a good family life together.
Do you have happy memories of your early life?
I do.
Were you close to your mom and dad? Or?
Yes, we were very close, and we had a happy family life.
Now, when I spoke to you earlier, and of course, as I indicated earlier in the interview, we've known each other a long time, 62 years, or at least you've known me 62 years. But you indicated that you were living in Gastonia in '29 and have some distinct memories about what is somewhat now infamous, the Lorraine Mill strike. And I'd like you to maybe, if you could, just kind of talk a little bit about what you remember about that and how that affected you, if at all.
We all knew about the Lorraine Mill because it was the biggest one. In fact, the reputation was that it was the biggest mill under one roof in the country. I don't know if that was true.
Mm-hmm.
But if you will ride around it today, you'll realize how big it is, really, while they are remodeling. But we knew that the workers were on strike. But I don't think we children realized the aspects of that situation, of what it was all about. Our main thought was about these people we heard had come down from the north. some of them were supposed to be communists from Russia, or with Russia wanting to bring Russian ideas here. And we knew that they and some of the strikers, I think, were camped in tents over on a hill at the end of Airline Street, sort of above, beyond the underpass. And we could ride by over the close and see those tents. But we children would talk about these people who had come from the north. That was the main thing.
Now you remember getting a phone call, I believe you said, things heated up when you were vacationing at your home place or where you were from in Hartsville.
Right.
And you got a call from your dad.
And in those days when we went to visit my grandparents, we stayed several weeks because you just...
It was a long trip.
It was a long trip. But and in those days people did not call long distance. My parents would write to each other while we were on vacation. But people called only for an emergency or a death in the family or something. And one evening my mother received a telephone call, long distance from Gastonia. And everybody gathered around to find out.
Well, that was a big event.
The event was. And it was the Chief Adderholt, our chief of police, had been killed, shot and killed. And we children knew about Chief Adderholt because there were not that many policemen, and we knew the names of a number of them. Mm-hmm. We knew the names of a number of the policemen. And but this was really national news, and that's how we heard about it. After that, of course, Gastonia was in turmoil for a long, long time.
You remember things not being settled, I guess.
Right, things were not settled, and the newspaper every day with headlines of, what had happened or what might happen. Mm-hmm. But...
What did your parents... Now, you lived fairly close to downtown at that time, off of 5th. You could probably walk to downtown, or did.
We did sometimes walk to town.
What was town like in the 20s and 30s?
Main Street. Mm-hmm. Main Street was an active place. There were stores. There were Matthews Belk, Eford's, Leon Slaughter's department store, Sweetland's, where you got all kind of ice creams and things, Kennedy's drugstore, a shoe store, 2 men's stores, and Silverstein's store. I noticed the other day the name Silverstein is still on that building, written vertically, and it brought back memories to me. But you would always see, you could get anything you wanted on Main Street. And around the corner was the courthouse, that was active. But you would always see people you knew. The post office was on Main Street at the northwest corner of South, I believe, and Main. Mm-hmm. It was a cream-colored brick building. We went up steps to it. And behind the post office in that area was the train station. And Gastonia was on the main line of the Southern Railroad, so trains came frequently. There was always action on Main Street.
It was kind of a transportation hub as well as a retail.
Right.
That's where people spent their time. And now you said you went to Central School through the 7th grade, and then you went to high school at Gastonia High School?
It was Gastonia High School. In those days, there were only 11 grades. Right. And we finished 7th grade at Central School, went to Gastonia High School, which I'm sure was probably the finest high school in North Carolina at that time. We had a pipe organ in it, a pipe organ. And at chapel, one of the teachers who would play music, and we'd march in to the pipe organ.
You had a chapel was part of your daily routine?
Well, most days. Mm-hmm. I think it was most days.
Now, wasn't there, it seems like I recall, there was a swimming pool indoor pool.
Yes, we had a swimming pool. But I want to tell you, we had a very good principal, Mr. Frank L. Ashley. He was a strict disciplinarian. And we did not run or walk even down the middle of the halls. we marched in single file on either side of the hall. In the center of the hall were students who were monitors. They wore a green armband with a white G on it. They had a notebook and pencil. And if somebody misbehaved, that person's name was written down and given to the principal. And usually he was standing in the hall watching, so people tried to behave. But it was completely different from school today.
Right. Well, did you feel like you had a good high school experience?
Oh, I thought we had a wonderful high school. And we had a stadium, and, you know, that was nice.
I know you would have graduated, what, about 1934?
35.
35? And did you immediately go to college?
I did. I went to
Was that unusual at that time?
Well, no. Those who could, you know, did go to college, and I did get a scholarship of some kind. But I went to Coker College in Hartsville, South Carolina. My grandparents lived in the town, but I stayed in the dormitory with my childhood friend, and we roomed together for 2 years. That was a very strict Baptist school at the time.
Mm-hmm. Were you a Baptist or a Methodist?
It was a Baptist.
I know, but what was your religion?
Mine was Methodist. But on Sunday, everybody had to go to church, to a church. And also, if you left the campus, you had to sign out where you were going. My grandparents lived only a block from the campus. But if I went to their house, I had to sign where I was going.
Well, they wanted to keep track of you because they heard about your
and
reputation.
There was a curfew at night. The lights had to be out at a certain time. If the night watchman saw a light on, you were reported. So, but you know, it was a wonderful school. I made so many friends and I loved it. And then, but I'd always said I was going to Chapel Hill, to the university. My father went there, and a couple of his brothers. He was from Sanford, North Carolina, which isn't too far away from Chapel Hill.
You graduated from the University of North Carolina when?
In 1939.
All right. And did you come back to Gastonia?
Yes, I came back to Gastonia.
Now, I want to hear a little bit about your courtship, so we got to save some time for that. But what did you do when you got back to Gastonia?
All right. I had a teaching certificate, and my main subject was history. But at that time, most of the history teachers had to coach football. Were coaching football.
Right.
And I couldn't do that. And besides, at that time, the schools wanted somebody with experience. Well, of course, I'd had no experience except my student teaching. So I did, for a while, get a job teaching business English at a business school here. So I learned typing and shorthand, which I had not had in high school. And then the orthopedic hospital was at the hospital had a school. They'd had one teacher, but they had a principal and several teachers. It was just formed. So I went out and asked the principal if I could come out and volunteer and help teach some of the children so I could get some experience. And he agreed. So after a while he said, you know, I'm going to be able to get another teacher and I would like to hire you, but your certificate is not quite adequate. So I went to summer school and broadened my teaching certificate.
At Chapel Hill?
At Chapel Hill. I went to Chapel Hill that summer. And so I hired and I worked there taught at the orthopedic hospital, which was a wonderful place. I loved the work there. It was just so gratifying.
I'm sure it was, because you were teaching a lot of kids who had some severe orthopedic problems and that were being
We
treated.
had an auditorium with no seats, no chairs, and we would push those children in beds who could stay in bed and study. We would push the beds in there. We had petitions for the classes. and then some could walk on their crutches, and others we taught at the bedside.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is the United States. You were back in Gastonia before World War II broke out in the United States.
Yes.
And so when Pearl Harbor was bombed, you were, I guess, teaching.
I was.
And did that change your life at all?
It did. I was greatly affected by World War II.
And how's that?
Because my brother was in the service. The draft law had come into effect, and when he graduated, and he and his friends knew they could not get a permanent job, and with the draft law,
Right.
they had to do. So most of he and his friends volunteered, entered for the draft, and then came Pearl Harbor. My brother was in the service, and I'd had so many friends at Chapel Hill. Not only girls, but boys who were friends, and we were congenial, and I knew that they were in service, and I really wanted to take part in it. To begin with, I think everybody felt that war. There was so much rationing, gas, sugar, tobacco, all kinds of things were rationed. And if a person did not have a close family member in service, he surely had a close neighbor or a relative. And the whole country was affected by the war. And of course, we had, with gas rationing, we walked more and everything. But I wanted to join either the WACs or the WAVES. My family physician said, you don't weigh but 85 pounds, and they won't take you. Mm-hmm. There's no hope for you going. But I thought
somehow I think you could have talked your way in there, but that's.
I wanted to go in the Red Cross overseas, but I did not weigh enough there. I was not big enough, but I was accepted for domestic Red Cross. Mm-hmm. So I went to Atlanta for an interview and was accepted. I hated to leave the teaching, but I wanted to be in the war program. And I was sent to American University in Washington to train and to have it for my uniforms. And then I was sent back to North Carolina, to Camp Butler, which was a wonderful place. There was a big general hospital and a big area of barracks for convalescent patients. It was, and we also had a German prison camp there. The Germans worked for the Red Cross, and we met I was in hospital service, not nursing, mm-hmm. but errands and attending to the needs of the soldiers. We met the hospital planes. There were only the seriously wounded came, and there were not a lot of those. And we met the trains. We gave the soldiers bags of toilet articles, cigarettes, because most of them smoked. And the Red Cross workers we had in our office, it was an older man and then a younger man. But when we came to the physical labor, they sent what we call the stormtroopers. I don't know what they were, but they were these big prisoners. And they didn't speak English much, but we could hold up how many fingers, like 4 cases, Chesterfields, Lucky Strike. They knew the names, right. And they could do that,
Now, let me kind of fast forward a little bit. You had not met your husband, Dr. Caldwell, at this time.
I met him at a dance at Chapel Hill.
Oh, you did?
Our parents knew each other. Our fathers knew each other through some organization, and he had heard of me, and I had met his parents because when I graduated from high school, Dr. Frank Graham was president of the university, and he came and spoke. And Jess, my husband later, was a student there, so his parents came from Cramerton to hear the president of the university speak.
Ms. Caldwell, you met Dr. Caldwell, you came back, you got married here at the Methodist Church, I take it?
That's right.
And he opened up a OBGYN practice?
In Gastonia.
In
In the Realty Building on Main Street.
Okay. And you set about raising your 4 children.
Correct.
And you've, I am sure, had your hands full with that prospect.
Right. His profession kept him busy, and I respected his profession, and I said he's always out with another woman, but sometimes she came always before I did. But I think each of us had realized our own roles. We were not as young as most people when they marry. We were older, and I think we were ready to settle down.
You think that helped your
Right, it did.
be successful in your marriage?
Yes.
To have
Yes.
a little bit older, not in your early 20s,
Right.
and obviously he delivered just lots of babies during his long
Right.
tenure here in Gastonia, and
Right.
you delivered a few yourself, 4. Now, as you begin to kind of build your family, I believe one of the things that you did together as a family is travel a lot.
Right, we did.
And if you could just briefly touch on that and tell me what y'all did as a family, and then later on when your
Right.
family got too old to travel.
When the children were small, we took them to the beach for a vacation. Jess, my husband, always planned a summer vacation. And one summer he said, they're reading comic books more than they're building sandcastles. I think we'll change our family vacations. So we began to travel in a station wagon, and through the years, with his arranging of different trips, we did enter every of the 48 states.
And don't forget that you also, about during that time, you began to take a weekend vacation with the Sumner family, and we have a tradition of over 50 some odd years of attending Chapel Hill football games.
That's right.
And
That's right. The Caldwell Sumner weekend is very, very important. And then we Jess loved to sail, and he took a Power Squadron course. The children had been to Camp Moorhead, a sailing camp, and so for a while we chartered first power boats and then sailboats, and we sailed in. He was the captain, I was the cook, and the children were the crew. We sailed Long Island Sound and Martha's Vineyard in the Bahamas, the Virgin Islands, and so those were great vacations we had. Then he and I began to travel in his later work days and his retirement, and we were fortunate to go to all 7 continents.
that is fortunate. Not too many folks can say they did that. Well, you have managed to live a full 97 years. You've stayed healthy and active. Do you have any secrets? I know you take exercise, or have been for many years,
Yes,
and still do.
I still do, and I've tried to stay healthy. I've always enjoyed cooking, and I've always tried to eat well-balanced meals, you know, because I love desserts, but I try to eat, have a good lifestyle.
And you, I know you go twice a week to the local armory to
Right.
participate in exercise,
That's right.
and you're still doing that at 97.
I still do that.
Any other secrets you can share with us?
Well, I had surgery when I was 90, and my children were concerned, but the surgeon told them later I operated on a 90-year-old, but with an 80-year-old body. So that made them and made me feel better too.
It should. And I think you're an inspiration to a lot of folks that know you, and maybe some folks that will get to know you through this interview. It's been a great privilege to spend this time with you, and we really appreciate you being a part of 90 over 90, and we'll see you on the internet. Thank you, Mrs. Caldwell.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The internet or the internet?
I'm a Tar Heel born, I'm a Tar Heel bred, and when I die, I'm a Tar Heel dead.